It's time to look back one final time at this week's Gamecock football game. It's Rooster Rant with Alex Jones and Matt Anderson
from the Chief Sports Network.
It is that time of the week. Welcome into this week's edition of the Rooster Rant. I'm with your co-host, Joe Machika. With me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, Alex Jones. Alex, how are we doing on this bye-week Sunday evening?
Doing great. Hope everybody out there is doing good. It was fun getting to watch a whole bunch of college football games yesterday, a whole bunch of great college football games, and then got to roll into some good NFL games today. So hope everybody out there enjoyed the bye week and get right back into it this week with Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss week is officially upon us. We'll do plenty of breaking down of that Ole Miss and Kentucky game. As we know, Shane Beamer was not speaking because there was no Sunday call-in show because there was no game to recap. Nothing from Shane Beamer, but yeah, Alex, that Ole Miss and Kentucky game. Let's start there. What a game! First off, back and forth. It was in Ole Miss or in Oxford. So big game there, and Kentucky finds a way to win.
Yeah, it was kind of Ole Miss got off to a good start. You had that quick touchdown. You're like, man, I wonder where this one's going to go because Kentucky was without Maxwell Harrison, who's probably going to be a first-round cornerback, and against those receivers, you're just wondering how Kentucky's going to be able to hold up. But I thought Kentucky was really impressive on both sides of the ball and did just enough offensively to get the job done. And defensively, I thought it was really impressive what they were able to do against that Ole Miss offense. I think they kind of showed the blueprint for what a potential blueprint for what South Carolina could do this weekend to try to get a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would think there are going to be some notes exchanged between Kentucky and South Carolina. I don't know how the relationship between Coach Stoops and Beamer are at the moment, so I don't know if any of that will go down. But, Alex, plain and simple, they don't call it Ole Make for nothing, right? It's Ole Miss for a reason. Couldn't get it done there with the kicker. I don't know why Lane tried to kick that thing. You have Jackson Dart, you have this high-powered offense. It shocked me that he didn't go for it and just, go all out, just run his offense into the end zone. We know SEC kickers, aren't the most consistent thing in the world. It puzzled me a little bit when Kiffin decided to go for the kicker there. And I think we're having some technical difficulties with Alex, so we'll get him back in a second. But yeah, the Ole Miss Kentucky again. Lane Kiffin brings his kicker out to win this game, did not make much sense to me. Another big notable part about this game, Juice Wells notably absent from this one. He did not have any catches. Was not a factor in this one. I know South Carolina fans were pointing towards Juice Wells' his performance in this one and didn't do anything. I'm assuming Juice Wells is going to come out for vengeance, this next week, obviously as South Carolina will. But yeah, it's Kentucky knocks off Ole Miss. Kentucky, a team that you beat pretty handily as well. I think Vandegrift, played well for the most part. But it was the rushing attack from Kentucky that was able to get the job done. It shows too that I think, and we got Alex back. Alex, I was mentioned about the field goal, but then also Kentucky ran the ball, pretty efficiently in this one, and certainly something to look at for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think we'll know more in a couple of days on the stats of Rocket Sanders and Lenora Sellers, but I think there's a blueprint offensively too. I think you can find some ways to run the ball, and I thought one of the more interesting things in this game was watching the battle of the line of scrimmage. I thought I was going into I wasn't sure what Ole Miss because Ole Miss hadn't really been tested on the line of scrimmage yet, and Kentucky played really well and caused some havoc, and I think that's going to be key with those wide receivers Ole Miss has to be able to. For the edges and those defensive tackles to be able to get after Jackson Dart and not provide as much time for him to sit in the pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. 4 sacks for Kentucky. That defense, Kentucky's defense is pretty legit. It came out flat against South Carolina, but since then they've been getting a lot of pressure, causing a lot of issues for their opponents. The 4 sacks, great point, Alex. Just getting pressure on Jackson Dart was something we hadn't seen yet. Up until this point, Ole Miss really hadn't faced a decent defensive line. And, South Carolina fans were waiting for this one like, hey, this is a defensive line in Kentucky that can maybe cause some havoc. Could be a little preview of of what happens when you rush Dart. And, it's going to be a big key for South Carolina too. I mean, we know how lethal this defensive line has been. Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart. And again, you're able to, get the win against Akron, but I still think there's a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth from LSU.
Yeah, I imagine you're going to see, South kind of come out fired up and ready to play just with, all the storylines that are out there. And, I think kind of going back to defensively, what you saw from Kentucky, Trey Harris got his catches and is a really good player, but there wasn't too much else that Dart really targeted in that game. And I'm not sure if that was just a credit to Kentucky's defense for locking down the Ole Miss wide receivers. But, I think Trey Harris is the key. It's going to be interesting to watch that matchup. And, I think it's just going to be really, really interesting to see how the South Carolina defensive line can get after this Ole Miss offensive line, because I think, after watching that Kentucky game, that's going to be key.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it's going to boil down to, the defensive line plays so much of a key role in defenses in the SEC, right? I've talked about it a bunch, how, last season you didn't have as much of a defensive line presence, and you saw what happened to the South Carolina defense. Now, going into the season, everybody was excited about this defensive line, and this defense is playing up to standard, a lot better than they did last season. And so, yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. And then, obviously, all eyes are on Juice Wells. I mentioned he didn't have the best game, as you know, against Kentucky. No catches, didn't really get things going. So he's certainly motivated to be back at South Carolina, and then certainly motivated as well to get on the stat sheet. But yeah, Juice Wells, man, this game is going to be monumental simply because of him.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger storylines, obviously, in this game, and I think there's just so much going on in this game. But I think that's going to have the stadium. I think it's going to be a pretty incredible environment. Again, you think it's probably going to be pretty close to what that LSU environment was. I'm sure that storyline is going to have a lot of juice in the stadium as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a garnet out as well. 3:30 kick. Fans wanted a night kick, but they get the 3:31. It's going to be fun to watch again, as to see because what A&M winds up being, because I think that's your next home game after that, and I believe it's slated for a night game, or should be. So yeah, Alex, this line is opening up -8.5 for Ole Miss as they come to Columbia. It's that line seems a little big to me. No.
Yeah, I was thinking about it last night after watching that game. I was like, maybe Ole Miss 4.5. 4 to 5, somewhere in there. I was thinking that's probably where that line's going to be. But, when it came out to 8.5, and I think it maybe opened at double digits too. And I think I've seen 8.5 to 9 is what it's at before we got on the show. And, who knows, maybe we'll see that drop down a bit. But, I was kind of surprised about that and interested to see what you thought on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's big. The line's a little big. Again, opening at double digits was crazy. But again, with Ole Miss losing to Kentucky, proving that they are human. I expect that line to go further, down or closer to 0 as the week goes on. 8.5 is a big line. 9's a pretty big line as well. Because again, this game is at Williams-Brice Stadium, the great equalizer, if you will. A lot of teams don't want to come and play here, and Ole Miss. That Kentucky game was at home, which is the biggest. I don't know how you lose that game to Kentucky in front of your home fans, because now you have to go on the road to South Carolina. We know, again, like I just said, Williams-Brice is one of the toughest places to play at. And they also have all of the, pun intended, all of the juice from Antwain Wells leaving last season. So, this seems like a trap game for Ole Miss. I don't know. The line seems a little big. It should be a little bit closer to 0. 4.5, maybe, something like that. This game's going to come down to a field goal for sure.
I'm interested to see where it's at towards the end of the week. I just have a feeling that that's going to drop a little bit more closer to, in South Carolina's favor. I don't think South Carolina's not going to be favored in the game, but I just think I could see it getting down to that 4, maybe 4.5 around kickoff.
Yeah, and get in while you can. Take the spread when it's still big like this, because again, I think this game is probably going to come down to 1 or 2 scores. 2 scores, maybe a garbage time touchdown or something like that. But I fully expect another back and forth one, similar to the LSU game a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a great game. I think key is just find a way to kind of limit Ole Miss's big plays in this game, kind of like what Kentucky did. They just didn't let Ole Miss, for the most part, have those big explosive plays, and kind of maybe, and, I thought another thing that was interesting, Kentucky did, and this is kind of Kentucky style offensively, but they held on to the ball. They won that time of possession battle, in a big way. And so, just maybe find ways, do whatever you can to keep Ole Miss's offense on the field. And then, if you get them down into where they get in their red zone, just find ways to keep them out of the end zone and hold them to 3. But, I think it's just a really interesting matchup that I could see really kind of line up with that LSU game where it goes back and forth for a little while.
Yeah, bend don't break. And I know, media this week is going to be quite interesting to hear what some of these players are saying about this matchup. Obviously, a lot of guys in this building that still they're played with Juice Wells. There's also a horde of transfers as well that are, I'm sure, getting the memo as this week has kind of rolled up on this team in practice and stuff. Guys are going harder, and certainly some expletives being thrown towards Juice Wells' way, I'm sure. Christopher checking in the chat. What's up, everybody? Matt Sellers as well. Hope Ole Miss doesn't flip a switch this week and drastically improve, but if they play the way they did versus Kentucky, we got this. I like that. It's a good point from Matt there. Anything to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I think you just wonder what Ole Miss's mindset will be in that game, because having played the schedule that they played early in the season, I don't think they were just ready for Kentucky to come in and punch them in the mouth like they did. And, I think when Kentucky did that in that game after kind of responding to that early Ole Miss touchdown, I'm not sure Ole Miss really responded too well in that game. Obviously, they were into the game down to the wire, but Kentucky was right there too and obviously did just enough to win. So I'm sure they're probably going to hit a reset button this week, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of what their mindset is, because there's a lot of hype around this team. Then they go and lose to Kentucky at home. Yeah,
and again, it's hard to get that hype back, on the road. It's sure you can win a game, but I guess this was a game that they were originally supposed to win regardless, right? They were just like LSU. They're supposed to beat South Carolina. And so I think now with them losing to Kentucky, it's just that much more of a bigger game coming to Williams-Brice Stadium next weekend. And like I said, I've been tweeting, or I think I mentioned it on Twitter. You can already feel the hype of this game already building in Columbia. Yeah. And I could feel it on Wednesday of this last week. It's like, all right, we're ready for Ole Miss. We'll watch Georgia and Alabama this weekend, and we'll talk about that game as well. But watch Georgia and Alabama this weekend. But as soon as Sunday hits, we're on to Ole Miss. We are on to Ole Miss.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be a great environment once again. You think about that LSU environment at game day and that juiced up the environment. But, I think it's going to be, just as good this weekend, just because, there's obviously a lot with the storylines that we mentioned, but, it's going to be a lot of recruits in. Obviously, they're going to keep building that list throughout the week. And, I think it should be just another great environment for South Carolina to kind of showcase their program.
Yeah. And, we know the fans are going to be loud. I think it's going to be huge for recruits. That's another good point, Alex. just visiting and got a long list of them brewing. As the atmosphere is going to be nuts. Sellers Craig Godwin checking in as well. Christopher says, what's the NCAA or SEC going to do about the Jackson Dart / other teams faking injuries? Those players and teams need to be punished for slowing down the game / momentum. The players should be out. I agree. And this is something too, Alex, we can hit before the break here. But I saw it a bunch. Ole Miss, Jackson Dart told his running back just to go down. I think it's a problem. I would think the SEC, you kind of just flag it, 15 yards or something, when it's obvious embellishment. Hockey's got an embellishment penalty, so I don't know, maybe throw the flag.
Yeah, it feels like, we've been seeing this for a while, but now it feels like we've been seeing it even more this year. And, I think it just came to light even more in that Ole Miss game from what we saw. But, I'm not sure exactly how you're going to enforce that. I'm sure it's something that in the offseason now they'll look at. I'm just not totally sure how you're going to be able to enforce it, because, teams could say, oh, he was really injured. I'm just not sure. But I think in the offseason after this year, they got to find a way to somehow enforce this and stop teams from doing that as much.
Yeah. I'm with you. And Matt saying it should be an unsportsmanlike penalty. I'm with it. Embellishment and unsportsmanlike, something like that. I can remember at hockey games as a kid when the other team got an embellishment penalty. It was kind of funny. It's like, what are you doing? You're faking your injury. Come on, it's a real sport. So, I'm with that. And on the other side, we'll talk about of this break. We'll talk about this Georgia and Alabama game. Absolutely wild game. There's also the SEC race starting to heat up. Some SEC games, in conference games finally starting to kick off. So we'll have all of that after this quick break. Yeah, welcome back to the Rooster Rant again. Just talked about Ole Miss coming to Columbia next weekend. Just broke down a lot about that game. Still plenty more to talk about as well. But quickly, this Georgia and Alabama game last night, Alex, was nuts. Jalen Milroe going absolutely bonkers. Ryan Williams going nuts. Milroe finishing 27 of 33, 374 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick in the win. Pretty legit stuff.
Yeah, that a lot of hype going in to the week about that game, and it definitely lived up to it. Like that was a fun game to watch, and just to see Alabama kind of come out hot, and then Georgia figured it out kind of in the second half and got back in, and then took the lead, and then Alabama came right back down with Ryan Williams and scored on that touchdown. Ryan Williams is a heck of a player. Like he is insane that he's a freshman. Just kind of going on that, like there's a ton of true freshmen right now in the country who are shining. South Carolina's got its own at Dylan Stewart, but it's been pretty impressive. But back to that game, Georgia got back into it, but Alabama did just enough to get the win, and that was just a heck of a game. And I think one of the more impressive things was Jalen Milroe, and I think he's just taking his game to the next level. And I think he's right in that Heisman conversation. He's just a heck of a player, and I thought he was one of the guys that stood out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Milroe had an incredible game. And then Ryan, well, you can't stop talking about the kid. Born in 2007, feels a little old to me. That I feel like that was right around when I started caring too deeply about all of my sports teams, at 7. But, yeah, that's craziness that a kid like that is dominating college football and then is going to go on to dominate professional football in 2 years. And same goes like to your point about other freshmen in the country. Like Dylan still has 2 more years ahead of him at the very least. Like he's going to make some team that's been tanking in the NFL very happy. But again, there's still 2 more years for Dylan Stewart and then Ryan Williams in college football. So it's electric to see all these freshmen shining. And then also too, I mean, with Georgia losing, it shows there's a lot of parity in college football this year, right? Everything is wide open. And the perennial powerhouses are going down. And even though, I mean, Bama's still up at the top, Saban's not at the helm. And so there's a lot of parity and a lot of, question marks as to what college football looks like as a whole. And, I mean, game day is going to Cal next week, Alex.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy. And, kind of sticking with your point on the parity, I think it's great for college football. And, you still have your teams at the top, like, those 2 teams, Georgia and Alabama, Texas, Ohio State. Those guys are in that tier 1 up there. But, I think just in this world now, you can see more teams can beat anybody any day. We're kind of seeing that. And I think that's great for college football.
Oh, yeah, 100%. There were a lot of other good games last night in Rutgers on Friday night. I don't know if you caught any of that game. Super fun to watch. I was waiting for that game. As soon as that was on the schedule, Rutgers and Washington on a Friday night, it just seemed like a party. It was for Rutgers, and then, I mean, Washington came back a little bit there at the end. But overall, great weekend of football. Any other games that stood out to you, Alex?
Yeah, what did you think about the Virginia Tech-Miami game?
Oh, that game was
and that
nuts.
ending.
It wasn't – I don't think it was a catch. Like
I don't think it was either. But, yeah, I mean, it was so close, and that's just a tough way to lose. But, some other games in Auburn, Oklahoma, that was just a heartbreaker for Auburn. Like, I thought maybe that was a game that they could get that win and maybe start turning around, even though they still just have so many questions. But then you had that pick 6 that ended up pretty much winning the game. And I'm just wondering – I'm interested to see where Auburn goes after this now.
Yeah, it's crazy to say Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat, but I think he is, right? I don't know if he's generated enough momentum. If he keeps losing like this, he might be out of there quicker than we think. And, like, I don't know. Like, Auburn is a very, very quick turnaround kind of program, right? If you're not, doing well right away, I think, Auburn's their fan base is ruthless. The board is ruthless. Tough job to turn around. But, yeah, heartbreaker there at the end. I don't know, but they're right on the cusp, like you said, Alex. So we'll see.
Yeah, and then kind of sticking with those, let's talk, especially with them coming up on the schedule. You got Alabama, that's obviously going to got to go to Bryant-Denny. That's going to be a really tough game. Then you got to go Oklahoma, and I think it's a winnable game for South Carolina. Oklahoma's defense, without a doubt, is very, very good, and they can. I mean, we've seen that so far this season. Oklahoma's offense, I still think they're figuring some things out. So. That's obviously down the road, but I think that's coming really an intriguing matchup there in Norman here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a great game. And then, I mean, Texas A&M sitting atop the SEC right now, 2-0, 4-1 overall. They also come to Columbia in November, first week in November. That's going to be a sneaky good game on the schedule. And then Missouri, I mean, also tucked in there at the end. A lot of good teams left on this schedule, and again, like two of them that are still left after that aren't named Alabama and Oklahoma are in the top 5 in the SEC, and are undefeated in the SEC too. So it doesn't get any easier. I know, like this October stretch is it's like golly, you got to find some breathing room, but then you can't. I mean, A&M and Missouri, all formidable opponents, and then Vanderbilt's no joke either. If you walk up to Vanderbilt like it's going to be in Akron, you might lose. Right? So it's tricky schedule down the way out for sure.
Who do you think, and after what we've seen so far, who do you think is the best team in the SEC?
The best team in the SEC, Tennessee, dude. I think Tennessee's legit, and I hate to say it. Yeah, I cannot. I Tennessee's fan, but Rocky Top is annoying. But yeah, Nico's the real deal, and the rest of the SEC needs to be very scared because he can play, and I think the rest of you were worried about that. And proof's in the pudding right now.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's up there. I think Alabama for sure is up there, and I'd maybe lean them in Texas right now as the top 2 teams. Yeah. Texas is really good, but Alabama's offense is just really, really good and electric. And I still kind of think defensively there's still some figuring out there defensively, but they obviously, Alabama has the talent. So I think those 3 right now are probably Auburn. You got Auburn, Texas, Georgia, and all the I think those are probably your top tier right now. And I mean, it's just kind of what we talked about earlier. It's just gonna be interesting to see. I think there's gonna be some in the SEC where it's just teams are beating up on each other. And so kind of the standings watch throughout the year is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah. With expanded conferences, meaning it's, you worry about getting into the playoff, but it's all right. Playoffs expanding ever more so as well. And Texas is winning games with their backup quarterback, man. Like, it's crazy. Now, granted, the backup is Arch Manning, and he's bound to do great things. But, what Texas is doing is pretty legit as well. So, yeah, Bama, Texas, but Tennessee as well up there too. Obviously, Ole Miss coming to Columbia this weekend. We'll give you some final thoughts on this one. But Alex, something we haven't talked about on the show yet is the health of Lenore Sellers. Obviously, we haven't heard anything from Coach Beamer regarding his health, but it's still technically up in the air whether or not he's going to play this week against Ole Miss. Do you have any thoughts on the situation?
You say on the injury situation? Is that
with Ashford and Lenore's?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll learn a little bit more on Tuesday, just where all these kind of injured guys, not all these injured guys, but I think the top 2 everybody are thinking about are Lenore's and Rocket. We'll hear what Shane Beamer has to say on Tuesday, then we'll get that first availability report on Wednesday. And I think we just need to wait to see kind of what we hear from those guys and where their health is. But I think. You're going to want Lenore. Obviously, you're going to want Lenore's and Rocket back. Those guys are electric and take the team to the next level.
Yeah, I fully agree. You need both of them to play. I think this is one of those games, and these next 3 games are one of those. It's the situation where you might have to play a little dinged up and a little hard. Like it's that time, right? Like you don't play Lenore's for Akron because and Rocket, you took him out of that game because if he gets even more so dinged up, you've got better teams on the schedule. Well, it's time. Like there's better teams. You're playing the better teams on the schedule, so you kind of have to, play a little hurt. It's kind of what it comes down to. Alex, kind of wrapping things up here a little bit. You got a pick for next week?
Oh, it may be a little early for a pick. We got to wait. I think everybody's going to have to wait to see what the injury situation looks like. But I think with kind of what we talked about earlier, Kentucky kind of showed you a blueprint, specifically defensively, for how you can beat this team or how you can beat Ole Miss. So it's going to be a really fun matchup, really. And I think there's some things that South Carolina can do on both sides of the ball that can give them a really good chance to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. It's still a little too early for a pick. Again, I also kind of need to see how bad the Sanders situation is, and I'm sure they're confident in Lenore's going forward, but you always have to wait for that injury report to get a full grip as things go along. Alex, anything else before we wrap things up here?
No, just make sure to stay tuned to the Big Spur. We'll have it all covered this week. And then, Matt and I will be back on Tuesday night for late night Gamecocks. Then you'll have Inside the Gamecocks every day. And I know Joe will be around too for his shows this week too. So just make sure to stay tuned and we'll have it all covered.
Yeah, walk through Wednesdays are back. So, Wednesday night's coming out 7 to 7:30, 8 o'clock-ish. Kind of just depends on how the comments are rolling. And what there all is to talk about. But big one this week coming up with Ole Miss. So appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Great show. A lot of people tuning in. Comments were rolling as well. So stay tuned to everything on the Big Spur and the Chiefs Sports Network. And have a great night. Thank you.